Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Welcome to the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Becky, and I am back again. It's good to be back. It's good to be here, talking about sex and self-love and all of those good things that go along with romance, sex, loving your body, loving yourself. So last time I was here, I talked a little bit about BDSM, a little bit about kink, a little bit about experimenting, and today I thought I would do a little bit more of an educational podcast, and kind of talk about the things that you don't really want to talk about when you're in the heat of the moment, and that is safe sex. I know, boring, but here's the thing. If you are having sex with multiple partners, or even if you are in, a polyamorous relationship, safe sex is so important in terms of keeping you safe, in terms of keeping any of your partners or your future partners safe, as well as not, spreading any STIs, any STDs, HPV, HIV. There's a lot of danger out there, right? And one of the things that makes me so sad in this kind of sexual history that we're going through is there's this kind of stigma to, not talk about safe sex. There's a lot of abstinence education in schools. I know I went to a high school where they were forced to talk about safe sex, in terms of just abstinence. With the thought process that, well, if we don't teach them about sex, they won't have sex. Not true. I mean, let's be real. When you're 16, 17, 18, hormones are raging through your body. All you want to do is hump the wall. I mean, there's no way to stop people from having sex, especially young adults. So how do we stop things like teen pregnancy? How do we stop things like the spread of STIs and STDs? Educate. You educate people. And this is something that goes beyond just high schoolers or kids who are just dabbling in sex, or this goes beyond all of that. It goes into, I know people my age who don't even understand the anatomy of their bodies. And I'm 26, so you would think they would Google it or research it on their own, but it just doesn't cross their mind. And this is the reality of the world that we're living in. I have several friends who are very sexually active, which is great. But sometimes, even things like getting yourself tested for, venereal diseases or any of these things, it can kind of go on the back burner, or you might not even think about it at all. And this is something that I would like to change. So let's talk about safe sex, right? What is safe sex? How do you have safe sex? So let's actually start by dispelling some safe sex rumors. I think in our society, we've kind of convinced ourselves that safe sex is boring or safe sex ruins the mood. And we've developed these myths about safe sex that just aren't true. And so I would like to go through a couple on here and dispel them. So, safe sex myth number 1. Planning ahead ruins the mood. No. We live in a day and age where people are so busy that sometimes you have to schedule time to be with your partner. But this doesn't mean that you're boring, or it doesn't mean that the things that you do in that scheduled time aren't going to be fun, aren't going to be romantic or passionate, or, whatever you're looking for that day. And in addition to that, planning ahead doesn't just mean finding time for your partner. It means being prepared. It means having a condom in your purse or wallet, having some kind of protection involved in this plan, right? It means, having protection, having lubricant, having the things that you need so that when you do bring someone home, even if it's like a Tinder hookup or someone that you met randomly in a bar and you both decided, yeah, let's do this. Like, I need you now. It means having some kind of protection in the moment. So that way, when you get there, you're ready. And this means, having condoms ready, checking with the other person. Are you on the pill? How do you want to do this? And again, it can be, you can almost make this a kind of foreplay. It doesn't have to be something clinical. It doesn't have to be, anything that should make anyone sex shouldn't make people feel uncomfortable. Talking about sex should not be uncomfortable. And additionally, if you're with a partner who thinks that you've ruined the entire mood because you want to know their, sexual history or their sexual status in terms of, well, do you have anything that you could spread to me? You don't want to be with that person anyway. If they leave on that account, like, sorry you didn't get any, but also maybe you dodged a bullet there. So the first myth that we're dispelling is the fact that planning ahead can mean everything. It can mean, you feel more relaxed because you already know that you have a condom, or you have some kind of backup plan, or you have a dental dam, anything. Just make sure that you are prepared, because one, you never know when you're going to meet that cute stranger. And two, you want to make sure that if they're not prepared, you are. So safe sex myth number 2 is, I don't need to be tested if I'm in a committed relationship. No. Everyone should be tested. Everyone should be tested. Even if you are in a committed relationship, even just to make sure that, maybe you broke up with someone and a couple months later you started dating someone else, you want to make sure that you didn't contract something from your last partner, and you want to make sure that you're not going to pass on, something from your last relationship or your last hookup onto a new partner. And everyone should be tested. I mean, basically that's the bottom line. And it doesn't have to be embarrassing. It can just be something that you say when you're in the doctor's office of like, hey, I'm becoming a little more sexually active lately. I want to make sure that I'm, haven't contracted something even though I'm practicing safe sex. It doesn't have to be embarrassing. It can just be something that you talk to about with your doctor even, or your gynecologist. And it doesn't have to be something to be embarrassed about. Sex isn't something that we should be embarrassed about as people. It can just be as simple as, I'd like to be tested. Don't have to go into detail. Don't have to explain it to anyone. Just, I'd like to be tested. Even if it's for your own peace of mind. And then, going back to the first sex myth, you're now prepared. Because if somebody that you are getting hot and heavy with all of a sudden stops and says, when was the last time you were tested? You can tell them. You can say, I'm free and clear, or then you can have a conversation to disclose your status, what you have going down there, and then also have an honest conversation with them of, I was planning on practicing safe sex anyway, but just so you know, X, Y, and Z. Additionally, even if you are in a committed relationship, there's always still a risk of, if you're not practicing safe sex, that you both could infect each other with something. So it's better to just get it out of the way, talk to your doctor, and figure something out. Lastly, probably one of the biggest safe sex myths out there is that condoms can lessen the feel of sex or lessen the sensation of sex. And I think you see this problem in a lot of media, that a lot of partners don't want to use condoms because it somehow diminishes the feeling of sex. And it doesn't have to be this way. And actually, one really helpful tip that I had found was, if this is a case for you, buy a water-based lube. And I'll tell you why. If you buy water-based lube, only water-based lube, because water-based lube will not affect or damage your condom. Once you have your lube, which you can buy at any sex shop, water-based lube, you can put a couple drops in the tip of the condom, and this will help stimulate any sensations that are quote-unquote negated when using a condom. And for men, this is a great kind of tip or trick that you can bring into the bedroom with you. Because one, if condoms aren't something that are bothering your lady partner or your other male partner, it's something that can help heighten your pleasure. So if you're finding that condoms aren't quite doing the trick for you, you would much rather have unsafe sex or raw sex, this is something you can do to put your partner's mind at ease. Because if there's one thing that I will always say, other than open communication with your partner, it's sex should be fun. Sex shouldn't be solemn. It shouldn't be analytical. It should be something that's full of passion and fun and laughter and enjoyment, just general enjoyment. So if you're thinking safe sex is boring, it does not have to be. And if you're with a person who thinks that safe sex is boring, then you need to have a conversation with them. So I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, we're going to be talking about ways that you can practice safe sex or contraceptives that you should think about before having sex with your partner. Stay tuned.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Welcome back to the GSMC Sex Podcast, hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Becky, as always, and we've already talked a little bit about dispelling some safe sex myths, right? Now we all understand safe sex is not boring. Safe sex can be great. It's good to be prepared. So now let's talk about some things that you can use in safe sex. So obviously, condoms are your best bet. And having a condom around at all times is good. That being said, don't use a condom that's been damaged. Don't use a condom that is beyond its expiration date. And especially if you're worried about, contracting something, and or if you are worried about pregnancy, condoms are probably your best bet. And now that we know that you can use a water-based lube to help heighten sex with a condom, you can always wear a condom now. You're welcome. And listen, condoms can't be gender stereotyped anymore. I mean, ladies should carry condoms, men should carry condoms, non-binary people should carry condoms, transgender people should carry everyone should carry condoms, right? Or have a condom handy when you need it. Again, purse, wallet, nightstand, put condoms there because you just never know. And again, that's part of being prepared. And so let's talk a little bit about types of condoms, right? You have your standard run-of-the-mill condom that you can buy at any drugstore, or you can get from Planned Parenthood. And these are stereotypically made for men or for people who identify as men. But you can use them on male anatomy. You can use them for fingers. You can use them for strap-ons or dildos. Or you can also do a female condom. And female condoms are, I think, less rare when it comes to sex. Female condoms and dental dams, I think, are more rare when it comes to sex, but are just as important and are just as viable options in terms of making sure that you're staying safe. And then in addition to condoms, in terms of even just, thinking about pregnancy, you can also take precautions such as, the pills, IUD, diaphragms, and this, granted, is mostly for ladies. But again, it's something that you can, talk with your partner about. Maybe you're caught off guard and you say to yourself, I'm clean. I've had the conversation with my partner. My partner is clean. We can probably have, quote unquote, unsafe sex, and be fine. Especially in heterosexual relationships, you also need to have the conversation of, are you on the pill? Do you have an IUD? What are the chances of pregnancy after this affair or after this, whatever. And ladies, this is on you to make sure this is your moment of being prepared, because even if you practice safe sex, but you are not interested in having a baby right now or in being pregnant at all, these are good measures to have. And the only thing that you need to do for this is to talk to your doctor. Unfortunately, we're in a day and age where sometimes birth control can seem really hard. But even just starting with a conversation with your doctor is the best way to go about it. Here's a fun little exercise for you. Using a condom when giving a blowjob. I know, it's crazy, right? I mean, I think when we think of having oral sex or of, giving or receiving oral sex, there's a thought that you don't need to take precautions. And again, this just isn't true. It's partially a myth of what we've decided safe sex can and can't be. And the bottom line is, if you want to have safe sex, condoms have to be involved. I mean, that's the bottom line. And this includes dental dams. I actually read recently that in the lesbian community, there's a higher rate of STDs and STIs within lesbian relationships because people just aren't being as careful or as quote unquote safe. And granted, in a lesbian relationship, you don't have to worry about pregnancy, but you do still have to worry about these STDs, STIs. And listen, I know, none of these things are very sexy, but it's good to have this information and to educate yourself on these things. That way you're protecting yourself and you're protecting your partners. So I ask you, the listeners, to help me in this crusade to dispel the idea that safe sex has to be boring, or we don't talk about these things because they're not sexy. They can be sexy. You just make them sexy. If you're in a situation where, let's say, for example, you and your partner are making out and you stop all of a sudden and you say, "Do you have a condom?" That doesn't have to be an awkward or ugly phrase. It can be something, kind of sexy of like, "I want to, but this is the only thing I need to have you." So what are we learning, kids? Safe sex, not boring. Sex education, very sexy. So I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, we're going to be talking a little bit about, what do you do if you have an STD or an STI, and how do you talk to your partners about it? Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
to the GSMC Sex Podcast, hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network. This is Becky again, and we've talked a little bit about safe sex in this podcast. What is safe sex? How do you have safe sex? What are some contraceptives that you can look into? And now I thought I would talk a little bit about STDs and STIs in terms of talking to your partner or future partners about them. Much like my last podcast about BDSM, it's so important to communicate with your partners. This is going to be a theme, I'm warning you now, of all of my sex podcasts. It's so important to talk to your partners and being open and honest with them, because once again, it will deepen your intimacy. You'll both have a better understanding of each other, and when you do decide to have sex, you'll both be on the same page. So, let's say you have an STD or an STI, and you're starting a new relationship, you guys haven't had sex yet, and you want to be upfront with them because you want them and they want you. And that's great. I mean, go for it. But before you do, you want to make sure that you both are on the same page, like I said. And this starts with having an open dialogue. And it doesn't have to be something crazy or, it doesn't have to be the end-all be-all of anything. You just have to say, I have this, and I still want to be with you, so, we have to practice safe sex at all times. And now that you have some of these fun tips and tricks, it, again, does not have to be boring. And like I said earlier, if you're, starting a relationship with someone who's like, oh, safe sex is boring, and you cannot convince them otherwise, maybe you don't want to be with them. Or maybe you say to yourself, is this relationship worth it if my partner, is willing to risk their health or is willing to risk my health? The one thing I will say is if you do get tested and you find out that you have herpes or chlamydia or anything, any STD or STI, don't just bail. As a bisexual, I've been with both men and women. I was in a situation once where I was seeing this girl. It was new and, kind of exciting. We would get together and have drinks, and we both were kind of hinting to each other that we wanted to go a little bit further, take it to a private space, as you will. And then one day I just didn't hear from her ever for like a month. And I would text her a couple times in the beginning. Where are you? How have you been? Haven't heard from you in a while. And after a month or so, I was like, well, I guess she wasn't as interested as I thought. It got to a point where I had sent her a text message saying like, hey, I get it. Like, you weren't into me. That's fine. I just wish you would have told me rather than just completely ghosting me. And granted, that text was more for me than for her. But it definitely caught her attention, and she came clean and was like, we weren't a serious item. I hooked up with someone and I got genital herpes, and I didn't think that you'd be able to understand or to take it. And I know that this means that we probably can't be together. But I'm sorry I ghosted you. And I gotta tell you, I was pretty stunned. I mean, for one, it was such a relief to know that it wasn't something that I did, or it wasn't that we didn't have chemistry, or that I was feeling chemistry that wasn't there. But it was because of an outside factor. And granted, it didn't work out between us because we were different people. We had different situations going on at the time. However, if it had become serious, it wouldn't have been something that would stop me from seeing her or from saying to her, there are things that we can do to get around this or to still have fun with each other. And we end up, becoming friends after that. But basically the bottom line is, if you have an STD or STI, and it's something that you can, like chlamydia, you can use antibiotics, gonorrhea, you can use antibiotics, they will go away. If you have something like herpes, it's a different story. And it can be scary, it can be not scary. You can have a conversation with your doctor of, what do I need to know in order to continue to have a sexual life? Don't just bail. Because one, Either people will surprise you and say, I really like you and I really want this to work, or they can't handle it, you were right, but at least you didn't bail on them. At least they don't think to themselves, it was something I did, but I don't know because they didn't tell me, or they didn't break up with me. Are we together? Are we not together? Just clear the air. And if you say to someone who can't handle it, at least you both know. On the opposite side, if you're in a relationship and your partner says, before you've even had any sexual contact or interactions with each other, and your partner says, before we do this, I want you to know that I have this, or, and how do you feel about that? One, don't be scared, because at least they had the bravery to tell you about it, even though it can be a difficult conversation. And two, don't let this be the breaking point of you leaving. We all make mistakes as humans, and you shouldn't persecute someone who maybe had a drunken one-night stand and it happened, or, wasn't as careful as maybe you would have been. But if you're in a relationship and your partner, has the responsibility to say that to you and follows through with it, don't let that be the one thing that says, oh, well, then I can't do this. Because maybe that person already feels guilty or already feels bad enough. And you making them feel worse about it, or saying, oh, well, then I can't do this relationship, is just going to make them feel worse about themselves. And maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was from a relationship where somebody cheated. There are a million reasons, how people contract things. And again, it doesn't have to be a scary conversation. It doesn't have to be the end all be all of everything. It just has to be something that we're mindful of, and something that, you're willing to talk about. And you guys can get creative, and you guys can do research together of, we really want to be together, but we're not sure how. That's great. You both want to have healthy sexual appetites, healthy sexual lives. And there are plenty of resources online that can help you do that. Planned Parenthood is one. If you have a Planned Parenthood in your neighborhood, they have tons of literature. They have, tons of condoms, tons of dental dams, and people there who are more than happy to give you the education and the materials that you need to live a safe sexual life. So thanks for checking out the GSMC Sex Podcast, hosted by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Becky, and you can also find us on Twitter and Facebook. On Facebook, we are the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, and on Twitter, our handle is GSMC_sex. We post a lot of really interesting stuff, as well as some links and articles about healthy sex lives. So definitely go check us out there, and let's have a conversation about sex. Additionally, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Good reviews always help us and help us get better. So I think I've talked enough for one podcast. But as always, remember to be open and honest with your partners and have fun with sex. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.